Zambia deploys army to curb violence ahead of polls. Plus, Rwanda welcomes Tanzanian president on state visit. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. Zambia's President Edgar Lungu has ordered the deployment of the military to suppress electoral violence ahead of the August 12 general elections, amid criticism by the opposition and other groups. He says troops had already been deployed to some areas in the capital, Lusaka, and would be sent to other areas in the country if the situation demands so. The All People's Congress Party says the move to involve the army is intended to cause fear and intimidation among the opposition. There's been incidents of violence by ruling party and opposition supporters across the country in the run-up to the vote. Well, Zambian journalist Alexander Musukutwane joins us now from Lusaka for more on this. Thank you so much for your time. Just help us understand the reason behind this deployment of the army in the country just a few days before the elections.
Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate for the opportunity granted to me to talk to you. We have about a few days. That's 9 days time before Zambia gets into a general election, which will be taking place on the 4th of August, just next week, Thursday. So a number of matters have been happening towards the holding of the general election. So the coming in of the order, rather, of having the Zambia Defense Forces, that's a number of security wings, that's Zambia Air Force, Zambia Army, Zambia National Service, and together helping the daily routine of the people that keep this country law and order, that's the Zambia Police, comes at a time when there also some stakeholders did express concern that the spread of violence has been increasing. This comes just a few days ago, where there was a murder, there was killing of suspected Patriotic Front cadres. That's the murder itself, according to the Zambia Police Service, did happen on Friday. And senior police officers, that's including the Deputy Inspector General of Police, that's the number 2 police chief in this country, Charity Katanga, who was shocked and said that, worrying that why should we be allowed to be in the situation of thuggery as a way of conducting politics. So in part, the police statement did say that police have noted with horror the grisly murder of 2 members of the Patriotic Front, believed to be that's murder being done or perpetrated by the United Party for National Development, UPND. So this happened within the city, just a few blocks away from the central business district. That's a Kanyama compound. So after that, there was some concern raised that maybe as we head towards elections in under 10 days' time, the Zambian president, that's President Edgar Lungu, should intensify security. And that is by asking other defense forces, like I mentioned, Zambia National Service, Zambia Army, and Zambia Air Force to help the Zambia police in ensuring that there is peace and order as we're counting down to the elections. So to that, just today, some few minutes ago, the Elections Commission of Zambia also announced that they have suspended the campaigns for the main opposition political party, that's the UPND, in that area of Kanyama. But as we were building up to the announcement by the ECZ, the main opposition political party, that's another front runner in the coming elections, were disputing that the person or the people that were killed might have been then one of the people said to have been killed by alleged UPND members is a UPND member. So there is that already conflicting and exchange of statements between the opposition political party and the stakeholders in the conducting of elections.
You know, Alexander, amid all this, how are Zambians feeling? You know, apart from Lusaka, there's been pockets of violence, you know, also reported in northern, southern and Muchinga provinces. Is this deployment of the army likely to allay the fears of voters ahead of this election?
There's been mixed reactions. Others are saying, well, it's timely, it's good, that there should be law and order because from the violence that has been reported in various parts of the country. Like you're saying, Muchinga province, northern province, Lusaka province, southern province as well. They've been saying that maybe if the Zambia Defense Forces comes through and help, that will be okay, because now we won't be having reports of the main opposition is sending its cadres to perpetrate violence. So we won't be having reports of the ruling party, PF, sending cadres. Others are saying, well, it's part of an intimidation process that you might be scared to go to the polling and freely conduct elections. The deep concern especially is coming in from the opposition, where they're saying that they've been calling for this from the time we had the last elections in the year 2016, that the reason why the opposition political parties do lose votes is because they don't protect votes. They need to have some members of the opposition standing and waiting until the last vote is cast so that they help or they witness the counting of the process. Now with the coming in of the Zambia, the diversification of security wings in conducting the elections might send some of the people to witness the counting of votes and ensuring that every vote is counted. That will send some of the members of the opposition away. So those are some of the fears, but it's a mixed reaction, I should say.
All right, then, you know, a lot to keep our eyes on ahead of this election. Zambian journalist Alexander Musukutwane, thank you so much for your time on the program.
All right, I do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And over in Ethiopia, the commander of the rebel group in Ethiopia's northern region of Tigray say they will continue fighting until their terms for a ceasefire are met. General Sadkan Gebretensea says the group aims to force the federal government to lift a blockade in the region and agree to a political solution to the crisis. The government has not reacted to the rebels' conditions. Thousands have been killed since war broke out in November last year. Millions of people have also been displaced by the fighting, which both sides have been accused of committing human rights abuses and war crimes. According to a UN estimate, at least 400,000 people are living in famine conditions, with access to the region still hampered. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's national carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, has denied reports that it shipped arms to the conflict-hit region of Tigray. The airline said that after the airspace was reopened, it only gave commercial essential service by transporting civilians. Flights to and from the Tigray region had been suspended because of the conflict that started in November 2020. The airspace was reopened in December 2020, then closed again a few weeks ago when Tigray rebels started fighting against pro-government forces. Ethiopian Airlines said it had no flights to the region since the recent closure. The reports are from people who want to defame and spoil its image. It says photos and uniformed officers disembarking are old and that it had never transported soldiers to combat areas. Well, security analyst Chidi Nwanu joins us now for more on the Tigray conflict. Thank you so much for your time. The situation here gets more and more worrying each week. Are we at a point of no return in this conflict?
It will be difficult. Good evening, first of all. Sorry, and thank you for having me on. I think it will be difficult to say we're at a point of no return. There are still options for, regional and internal discussions to kind of halt the the crisis, but it seems to be, but it's taken on a life of its own. And obviously, the integral elements have now snowballed to include further and further participants. So, from this being, a conflict between essentially the TPLF and Abiy Ahmed, the president, it's now, taken an ethnic dimension, with the Eritreans, now the Oromo, the Amara, all joining in, sending in their militias. This is now taking on the element of being an interethnic civil war, which is a much more dangerous beast. And when you factor in all the regional actors, not just Eritrea, but Sudan, Egypt, all of whom have their own reasons for wanting a destabilized Ethiopia, as well as wanting a stable Ethiopia. Each of has their own disputes with Ethiopia. Egypt, in relation to the Gerd Dam, Sudan in terms of land disputes, as well as, refugees, etc. It's a very dangerous and combustible mix. So there is still time. There's still hope for, a reasonable solution, but there aren't many options available to anyone who wants to implement that.
So what's the solution here, though? Rebels say they aim to force the federal government to lift a blockade in the region and agree to a political solution to the crisis. How likely is the government to agree to this, though? And we have to bear in mind the huge humanitarian cost of this conflict.
So, there's two questions there, or there's two answers to that question. And the first is obviously that there is the only way you're going to avoid massive bloodshed and an increased humanitarian crisis is through a political solution. The likelihood of the government at this point in time accepting such a solution is still quite remote, as they've suffered a fairly humiliating defeat at the hands of the TPLF, and they will be wanting revenge. At the same time, as I said, there's been this mobilization of different ethnicities, which adds that complication. In addition to that, you've got the Eritrean element who have their own reasons for hating the TPLF, for wanting to destroy the TPLF, and also for keeping Ethiopia, weakened. So unless there is a significant intervention, both regionally and internationally, to force Abiy Ahmed and the TPLF to the table, because the TPLF are not innocent in this. They generated this crisis as much as Abiy Ahmed. It's very hard to see how we're going to get to those political discussions in which everybody feels that they've got enough to keep them, off the battlefield.
All right, and you mentioned Eritrea there, Egypt. What role should regional leaders be playing in this to ease this conflict and ensure that it doesn't spread, to neighboring states?
So this is again a very important but complex question, because the strongest powers, militarily, economically, are in that border Ethiopia, you would say are Egypt and Sudan. As I mentioned, each of them have their own issues with Ethiopia, and each of them have their own. They have their own reasons for wanting Ethiopia to be destabilized, because that would help them in their positions or in their negotiating positions over their own disputes. But they also obviously have an interest in Ethiopia being stable, not just from an economic point of view, but from a humanitarian point of view, in terms of refugees crossing their border and disruptions to their own trade. So there has to be, I would say, a super regional approach, and that's a super regional body, for example, the African Union or the United Nations, with the Western partners and Eastern partners, so China, the United States, United Kingdom, Italy, other countries that have strong historical links to this area, to come together and act as external guarantors, while the super regional bodies like the AU mediate a peace, whilst the regional bodies act as guarantors and also, guarantee not to meddle, for example, like the Eritreans, but sending troops in to take part in the fighting, or the Sudanese using the opportunity of the fighting to, take over disputed territory. There has to be that kind of a high-level intervention, and unfortunately at this point it doesn't seem that that's forthcoming.
All right, then, security analyst Chinenwa Onu, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Still to come on the program. United Nations wants UK apology for land grabs in Kenya. More details in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Well, it was quite an eventful weekend across the continent. Let's take a quick look now at the news and stories that made headlines over the weekend.
We begin on a positive note.
after snatching a gold medal in the men's 400-meter freestyle at the Tokyo Olympics. Tunisian swimmer Ahmed Hafnaoui returned home on Saturday to a hero's welcome from family and friends. The 18-year-old champion stunned swimming superpowers with his victory. He's the youngest Tunisian athlete to qualify for the Olympics. Also on Saturday, a shipment of 410,000 COVID-19 vaccines donated by Britain arrived in Kenya.
This is the first of 2 deliveries we'll be making. This is the bilateral donation, and we're also sending some through the COVAX system, of which we're great supporters. So we'll be sending 817,000 doses, hopefully in the next week or so. And we're looking forward to these vaccines, which are here behind me today, reaching the Kenyan population who need them during the course of next week.
Britain, which has fully vaccinated 72% of its adults, is sending 9 million Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines overseas in a first batch of donations to Indonesia, Jamaica and Kenya. The country has pledged to donate 100 million vaccines overseas by next June, 80 million of which will go to the COVAX scheme, which ensures equitable global access to vaccines. And on Sunday, high-ranking army and police officials were arrested in Madagascar in connection with a failed attempt to kill the country's president. The arrested include 5 generals and several active police officers, meaning 21 people are now being investigated over last month's failed assassination. Authorities also seized a gun and $250,000. 2 humanitarian rescue ships pulled 394 migrants from a dangerously overcrowded wooden boat in the Mediterranean overnight on Sunday, in an operation lasting about 6 hours. The German and French NGO ships Sea-Watch 3 and Ocean Viking rescued the migrants in Tunisian waters, 68 kilometers from the North African coast, near all facilities and other ships. It's not clear if there were any deaths or injuries among the migrants who were in the wooden boat, which was cramped with migrants on deck and inside the hull. Back to our main stories for the day now. Tunisia's Parliament Speaker, Rachid Ghannouchi, has been discharged from hospital hours after he was admitted. Mr. Ghannouchi's admission came days after he called out President Kais Saied's move to suspend Parliament and sack the Prime Minister and Cabinet. The Speaker had said the President's move was a coup and has staged a sit-in outside Parliament after being barred by soldiers. Meanwhile, a sharp increase in COVID-19 cases and years of government neglect to maintain the Tunisia's health system has stoked anger from a struggling public.
Saadia Abidi and her family in Tunisia are grieving. Her 71-year-old sister recently died of COVID-19. A sharp increase in cases and years of government neglect to maintain the country's health system has stoked anger from a struggling public.
My sister was born in 1951. She was 70 years old and still in good health, but she died of COVID-19. A lot of people died.
Tunisia's public health sector was once a point of national pride, but misgovernance has undermined it, impacting people like Abidi and many in poorer regions. So far, around 940,000 people have been fully vaccinated among a population of 11.6 million. Tunisia has reported around 18,000 deaths and more than 500,000 infections. At one point last month, it had the worst infection rate in Africa.
In every household we have a funeral, and we have pain and wounds. And this is our problem now. If we're going to talk about resources, this is a cumulative problem. We can't hold just 1 or 2 people responsible. Our government didn't work on this issue because the government did not value the citizen.
Failures in dealing with spiraling COVID-19 cases in Tunisia brought many Tunisians to the street in protests in the weeks leading up to the president's decision to sack Prime Minister Nikem Michichi and suspend parliament with support from the army. That was the final straw for many people in the government's handling of the pandemic and prompted the government to announce soon afterwards that military will take it over.
To diplomatic relations, Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan has arrived in Kigali on her first official visit to Rwanda. She's expected to hold talks and have a joint press conference with President Paul Kagame. Tanzania is the second biggest exporter to Rwanda after China. President Samaya's two-day visit is aimed at strengthening relations, and the pair will sign several trade agreements. The two leaders are expected to discuss the first stages of a $3.6 billion railway project, which was agreed in 2018. The 532-kilometer railway will link Isaka in northern Tanzania with the Rwandan capital. Also expected on the agenda is a discussion about the militant Islamist insurgency in Mozambique's Cabo Delgado region, which borders Tanzania and where Rwanda has already deployed 1,000 troops. And our Mozambique state-owned fuel distributor Petromok has denied links to an oil spill that happened over the weekend at the port of Pemba off the coast of Cabo Delgado province. The company's board chairperson, Helder Chambise, says there's little information about the origin of the fuel found at sea. He adds that if the company was responsible, the local authorities would have informed them. Mr. Chambise says investigations are ongoing to find out the origin and reason for the spillage. It was estimated that the spillage caused the loss of at least 10,000 litres of fuel. The incident attracted large crowds, including women and children, who risked their lives as they filled their jerry cans with the fuel. Police were deployed to address the situation. South African fuel users will be paying much more for each litre this month. In a statement released by the Energy Department, the petrol price will go up by 91 cents per litre for both grades, while diesel will increase by between 54 and 55 cents per litre. The department says the new prices will kick in at the stroke of midnight on Wednesday.
Fuel prices go down to get us used to what the regular fuel is going to be. It gets increased to a specific point, and then we get outraged. At some point, fuel was at 10 Rand, shot up to 12, settled at 11. It's going to happen. It's the game. It's the game.
Well, I do think that it's a huge increase during the pandemic, but equally it went down quite significantly about a month ago when the fuel price dropped significantly. So I feel that we're almost kind of back on where we were before the reduction of the fuel price.
Hey, the fuel price increase is very bad, especially now we were on COVID-19, so everything when it goes higher is killing us.
The British government has been criticised for failing to apologise and compensate members of two communities in Western Kenya whose land was taken away during the colonial era. A group of UN investigators have highlighted the human rights violations against the Kipsigis and Talai people in Kericho County that happened in the 19th and 20th centuries. These included unlawful killings and sexual violence. Over 500,000 people are estimated by the UN team to have been affected. The special investigators have also criticised the UK government for failing to adopt measures to establish the facts and know the truth about the circumstances surrounding these violations. They sent their report to the government at the end of May and gave them 60 days to respond. That time has now elapsed and there has been no response. The International Committee of the Red Cross is warning that a growing climate crisis combined with conflict is pushing herders in Somalia to abandon their way of life. They're struggling to find water and pasture for their animals as conflict further weakens their ability to adapt and find alternative grazing areas.
For Ahmed Mohammed, it's getting harder to feed his animals. He's one of Somalia's herders. It's a community that, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross, are being pushed to abandon their way of life due to conflict and the climate crisis.
We lost 50 animals. There were 70, 50 died, and we're left with 20 camels. Some no longer have livestock. They lost them all. That's how it is, and we're surviving.
Erratic weather patterns, floods and droughts are making pasture harder to find. ICRC says conflict, the global health crisis and recent locust infestations have made matters worse.
We have to recall that since 3 decades or more, Somalia is in civil war, in conflict. This conflict has displaced thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. But now, Somalia is located in East Africa, the Horn of Africa, that is known to be, in terms of global warming, 2.5 times faster than the rest of the world. This has brought extreme weather events. These extreme weather events, due to global warming, climate change, are droughts, floods, cyclones. All these factors now are more frequent, first, and are worse in terms of intensity in Somalia.
More than 30 climate-related hazards, including droughts and floods, have hit Somalia since 1990. That's a 3-fold increase on the 20-year period before. The recurrent nature of the climate shocks makes it hard for the herders to recover, the ICRC said, while conflict weakens their ability to adapt or find alternative grazing areas. The ICRC says it's supporting 11,000 families left in a precarious situation following a prolonged dry season this year.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale.